said that vodka supplies to the Republic of South Africa have already been established. You know, this is a very correct, serious step. Why? Because if you drink vodka, as we say, you need to have a snack with something. And therefore, meat products will certainly follow. That means grain supplies. That's a plus for grain supplies. For example, we are getting together with our friends from Bahrain and creating a whole hub there for the supply of wheat from Russia.
Glory to Russia. Glory to Russia. Glory to Russia.
Russia, we have come today because we understand that this is the last battle. In fact, the last battle of our people, and not only the Altai people, but all the peoples who live in the Altai Republic, and in principle in Russia. The
Moscow authorities have driven Altai to despair. Probably the most massive rally in the last decades took place in the capital of the Republic. Thousands of people appeared on the streets of Gorno-Altaysk. They are demanding that their republic be protected from the tyranny of Moscow bureaucrats. The authorities cut the constitution of the republic and removed the words about territorial integrity. According to our constitution, the only source of power in the country is the people. The state consists of basic concepts. I'll tell you, the people and the territory. If there is no territory, if there are no people, such a state no longer exists. And today I see that this process is in full swing. Apparently, Moscow does not like the fact that Altai exists at all. The security forces put pressure on everyone who tried to speak out against such an initiative, and such impudence brought people to the boiling point. The people understood that they need to defend their republic and stand to the end.
Today in the Altai Republic we see how our people are disappearing. People are leaving the republic because they cannot find work here, because they cannot realize themselves here. And we are losing territory. And do not say that the locals are selling it. Yes, they sell because it is economically difficult, but it is 20 to 30%, and 70 to 80% goes either through auctions or to investors for their regional investment projects, as they call it. That is where the land goes. And it is not you and me who sell it. That amount cannot be sold. We need to understand that you and I should not just speak out, just stand here and leave. No, we must achieve our goal to the end, because there is no way back.
Last week we said how the Altai people blocked the federal highway. They were protesting against the municipal reform in the Rio head of the Republic, Andrei Turchik. Intimidating people, the Tsar's henchmen grabbed the activists and dragged them to hell. The result was unexpected for the authorities. The Altai people were not afraid and came to the court building to support the detainees. Then the authorities pulled up another portion of Derzhimort, and this has already caused mass protests against the reformer. Video messages, pickets, posters even appeared on trucks. The capture of one of the drivers was led by the head of the Criminal Investigation Department of Gorno-Altaysk himself. In the Rio, the governor called on the rebels, was imbued with the spirit of the sacred Altai and promised to make important amendments to the law. But can he be trusted? Do you remember the April protests of the Altai people? Then Turchik removed the words about territorial integrity from the constitution of the republic. This is a betrayal of the region. The protege in Moscow cannot be trusted. He is only an executor of the will of the federal center, whose dream is to destroy the national entity. This is not a whim of the Pskov thief Turchik. This is a federal special operation. In Caucasia, despite the resistance of the governor, they have already adopted a law abolishing two-tier self-government. The Supreme Council of Caucasia, which is almost entirely a member of the United Russia Party, tried. Opposition Deputy Oksana Razvarina correctly stated that the law removes citizens from participation in governance. Now the main challenge for the domestic economy is the transition to a sustainable trajectory of balanced growth. I want to emphasize this. On the trajectory of balanced growth, we must ensure high-quality, intensive dynamics in the real sector by modernizing production and increasing labor productivity. And it is better, of course, if this is done not in an intensive way, but through the introduction of new technologies. Why are there protests against a single-tier system? It is based on the principle of binding to the population, not to the territory. People understand that this is the centralization of power, this is a single management of everything, and first of all, the budget is very important. It does not take into account the specifics of the territories and the needs of the local population. This is preparation for consolidation, the purpose of which is to destroy the historical and cultural identity of our peoples. Let's remember the unification of the 2000s. What was the result? Phew. The annexed districts are experiencing demographic degradation. For example, more than a quarter of the population left the Koryagski district after consolidation. The Komi Permyk, Taymyr, Ustorda, Buryat, and Evenki okrugs have also lost most of their population. But the autonomous okrugs that resisted unification show a completely different positive trend. A single-level system of governance destroys villages and towns. Doctors are leaving, schools and kindergartens are closing. People are being deprived of their right to choose. If the Altai Republic is united with the Altai territory, the Altai people will make up about 1% of the population, the rest will be Russians. And the living people will turn into a small problem at the level of statistical error. The Altai people are not fighting against reform. They are fighting for their survival against the evil empire. It is not similar in terms of territory, this is a competitive advantage. Even the Russian Empire consisted of territorial units with a separate system of governance. There were provinces, the Great Don Army, the Kingdom of Poland, the Grand Duchy of Finland. By the way, with their own constitutions and parliaments. The United Kingdom consists of 4 parts, each with its own internal structure: England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland. In addition, the Isle of Man, but the Channel Islands, Gibraltar. Smart countries change institutions to suit heterogeneity, looking for their own uniqueness. Social and cultural diversity are prerequisites for progressive evolution, for continued development. But this is not in Russia. While talking on camera about investments, innovations, in practice the authorities are trying to destroy diversity and turn everyone into one obedient herd, uniform. The Russian Federation has driven itself into a dead end of centralism, and any projects imply consolidation and other unitary, stupid strategies. Vertical thinking contradicts free natural development and brings the Russian Federation closer to collapse. Gentlemen officials, do not stop. In the fall, a new head will be elected in the Komi Republic. At the same time, the communists have a high rating. The authorities are afraid that they will not be able to count the election results correctly and therefore do not allow Oleg Mikhailov, a popular communist candidate, to register, that is, they do everything to prevent him from taking part in the elections. Before that, you were driven away by the rage of veterans of the so-called SVO, and they did not allow Mikhailov to submit documents. In support of the communists, they hold single pickets. Even the deputy of the State Council of Komi, Nikolai Brodenkov, joined the action, holding such a picket in his native Izhma. Despite total control, Moscow is losing power in the national republics. People are beginning to understand who Putin is and are ready to elect anyone, even communists. By the way, inventors without alternative elections. What they fought for, they got. They are ready to elect anyone, just not Putin's united Russia. This is already a warning sign. Russia cannot be defeated. It can only be destroyed from within. Russian television continues to admire Operation Web and is no longer embarrassed to admit that it was a complete failure for them. Military correspondent Alexander Kotso said that the strikes on their airfields cannot be called terrorist attacks, because they are military targets.
What happened to our planes all over the country? I will tell you honestly, I am not inclined to, qualify this as terrorist attacks. We are, after all, at war. We have a difficult, protracted conflict with a very serious enemy. I am not talking about the collective West now, I am talking about Ukrainians in their purest form, and because they are a very dangerous, cunning, inventive and insidious enemy.
And what are we hearing now? It turns out that it is not only the West that is a serious and dangerous enemy, but Ukrainians in their purest form. If at the beginning of a full-scale invasion they were told that they would publicly recognize the professionalism of the Ukrainian special services and would suffer such losses, the Z-patriots would only laugh. After all, his colleagues are still trying to convince the people that they are fighting the collective West, and that is why they have been marking time for years. We are fighting NATO, you are an ignorant Nazi. But Kotz admitted that all this is a lie, and they cannot cope with the Ukrainian armed forces.
I'm also not a supporter of blaming everything on Western intelligence agencies. Many of our highly respected authoritative experts today say, it was not the Ukrainians who did this, it was Misha, it was Masad, it was the CIA. Listen, let's not make our enemy, a serious enemy with whom we are fighting on the ground, some kind of stupid monkey that is incapable of anything without its curators Misha or Masad. This is not true. The Ukrainians are very inventive, very cunning, as I have already said. That is, now Russian war correspondents themselves admit that their propaganda is brazenly lying and underestimating the enemy's strength, calling Ukraine a puppet of the West that is incapable of anything without their help. Some aircraft that we no longer make, well, like the Tu-95, for example, yes, the idea itself, the execution itself, it seems to me, is purely Ukrainian. I would still say that this is sabotage, not a terrorist attack, because we are at war and they attacked military airfields, not civilian ones. What happened in terms of execution? Yes, we see this, very, painstakingly prepared in conspiracy theories, conditionally conspiracy theories, sabotage, when, in a rented warehouse, they prepared several trucks that loaded portable cabins, yes, in the roof of which devices were mounted, in which all the fronts were located, controlled via cellular internet through GSM modules. There are a lot of questions. Firstly, well, we were completely unprepared for the fact that there is no rear with these technologies, the question of using FPV drones in the deep rear, but it was a matter of time. Here you go, this time has come.
That is, according to the Kremlin war correspondent, as a result of Putin's wisest decisions, Russia no longer has a rear and there are no safe places left in the country. After all, Ukraine can reach anywhere and hit targets thousands of kilometers from the border. This is
an issue that we have also been discussing, but I don't know for how many years. The issue of protecting our aircraft at airfields. The issue of physical protection. We are now getting videos from, I think, 2021, where our former head of the Ministry of Defense says that the construction of reinforced concrete shelters at airfields has begun. Where these reinforced concrete shelters are, is unclear. There are no safe places now. I don't know what will happen next. Maybe there will be a submarine base in Kamchatka, nuclear, or in Vedyevo, yes, in the Northern Fleet. Anything. Or launches or launch silos of our strategic nuclear forces there. I don't know what will happen next. The question, again, is about the work of agents, when such a whole organization, yes, clandestine, operates in Russia. That's why it wasn't opened. With this, of course, there are many questions.
Here, patriots are already commenting in panic on what is happening with the Russian economy. Gherkin's comrade Maxim Kalashnikov said that Russia is moving toward an economic collapse, because of which a real revolution against the current government could begin in the country. Despite all these cheerful statements that everything is fine, everything is moving forward, we are winning. No, guys, unfortunately, the situation is very bad. I have long forgotten, I ignore words about unprecedented economic growth. Everything, even officially it has stopped, that we have the fourth economy in the world by some purchasing power parity. It is impossible not to see what is happening in the rear right now in the economy. A laminar process of crisis payments, then our production begins to fall, B fall, and first of all, production with high added value falls. As a rule, it begins with the fact that you do not have enough sales for your products and you begin to have problems with liquidity and financial flows. In this situation, the first thing you have to save on, there are no other options, is to reduce the level of wages for workers. You have been gathering them for 3 years, preparing them, teaching them, there were not enough turners, welders, plowmen. And now you say a 4-day week, and unpaid leave and everything else. We, as a plant, were one of those who supplied products to both Roselmarsh and the Jurovsky plant. I have not supplied either one for more than 6 months. Those unpleasant things that happen at Roselmarsh, you see, here is one problem, in my opinion, due to the scale of this company, that trouble, that is happening there, it has become widely known to the whole country, but because they are big, because they cannot go unnoticed. But this is only the money from the very top. After all, the same situation is with everyone. That is, they also have 12,000 people working there, who are at the main enterprises. In total, Rosselmash employs approximately 60,000 people in the country in mechanical engineering and 60,000 people in high-value added production. This means that their sales have stopped. Now these bankruptcies are not declared only because people, even under the risk of criminal prosecution, understand that if they declare this case, then what they have been doing for 15 to 20 years, recreating factories in Rostov, in St. Petersburg, in Yaroslavl, in Tutayev, this is everything that people have put their strength and health into for the last 15 years, reviving these enterprises, it will all go down the drain, simply because they will lose their youth and declare themselves bankrupt. And people are taking risks, but this is up to a certain limit. Our ruble has been falling. It was 100, it became 79. Guys, I want to ask, do you understand what this means that everything Chinese, which had duties from 0 to 5%, has become 25% cheaper on our market today? And then the question arises, are you still surprised that all our trucks have filled all the roads, and Kamaz trucks are no longer bought in warehouses? We can state that an economic explosion is being prepared in the rear, which should literally burst out in a few months, that a crisis of non-payments will be generated, like in the 90s, in the terrible 90s, which led to the shutdown of enterprises, throwing people out onto the streets. This is simply obvious. So it is surprising that the central government lives in some kind of cocoon and apparently does not understand this problem. Honestly, what is happening now, for me, clearly paints such a continuation of the operation web in our economic rear. Klupov stated that the occupiers are not advancing at all. They are advancing too slowly. There are no breakthroughs in any direction.
It would seem that we are talking about increasing our capabilities through symmetrical strikes. Ukraine has clearly shown us this. We have experienced it in our own example. The asymmetrical strike on Kursk brought us a lot of trouble. It is not possible to say, but it is necessary to once again raise the issue of changes at the front, a change in this position. Maybe someone will be satisfied with this, that thank God, that at least we are advancing this way, without any breakthroughs. We have talked a lot about the lack of space, the unmanned nature of the equipment, the role of artillery in modern warfare, armored forces. But nevertheless, we also have a general staff, which leads both academies and research institutes. We need to get out of this situation, this creeping offensive, new forms and methods of using troops. And, accordingly, based on this, it is necessary to return again to the question of, the destruction of the leadership. Israel showed us that they practically decapitated both Qasr and the armed forces of Iran. The
Second Army of the world is once again being called upon to learn how to fight from other countries. After Operation Spider's Web, the Zelenskys shouted that they should do something similar. Now they are looking at Israel in the hope that they will be able to repeat something and break through the front line. Of course, our military system against the background of what Israel is doing. I am not a patriot of Israel, but I must admit that this historical enemy of ours acts very, very effectively against the background of this word. We really should learn. Here, moreover, a very alarming bell has just sounded. A very alarming bell has sounded. In fact, Operation Spider's Web was repeated on a larger scale in Iran. See, how touching. But in fact, this is a model of nuclear disarmament. Nuclear missile potential can be increased by tens of %, and if I were our Bamanda, I would, of course, be scratching my head. Then Zetnik casually stated that Russia is on the road to collapse and will most likely have to be saved. Well, in general, if everything develops the way it is developing, then the Russian Federation will have to be.
Colonel Klupov stated that Russian television shows footage of an intensive and successful offensive, which is not true. Assessing the situation on the fronts over the past week, one can conclude that the front, regardless of the fact that we have a rosy picture, rosy in the wrong sense, such a promising picture, is on television screens. In fact, the front is in a certain degree of stagnation. There are no serious activations visible in any of the directions. The front continues to move as it was moving with such a creeping offensive. Well, on the one hand, this is good, but on the other hand, the advance is quite slow. Pankin demonstrated the bright picture that Colonel Klupov spoke about. And all the same, the Z-Patriot needs the occupiers to do at least something that will please all the Z-Patriots. We are so tired of the lack of any big news from Ukraine that would, well, make us a little happy that progress is really happening. Yes, we are constantly talking about the fact that we are about to approach Sumy, and not only Sumy. Every day there are reports of the capture of new settlements, but in such a way that it would really shake things up and spread across all the internet media, including Telegram channels. There has not been such news for a long time that would make every Russian person happy, yes, every patriot of Russia. The Zetniks continue to talk about the special Operation Spiderweb and want something similar to happen in Ukraine, to show the footage on TV. Information support for what is happening, we all understand, is very important. They have something to brag about, something to show the audience. Yes, these, our smoking strategies. We too, need to show something. There should be some kind of picture so that you, not only here but all over the world, can see that there's a real heatwave going on in Ukraine. The
cynical presenter liked the photos of the destroyed Kherson administration, and he wants to see more. At the same time, the Zetniks do not say a word about the fact that they are striking at civilian infrastructure. It still does not fit in my head that Russians can only be happy about other people's grief. It
was a beautiful shot, really beautiful, a blow to the Kherson administration. Now that's what I understand. These are the kind of shots that are needed so that they run to the best telegram houses, so that there is something to show. This would remind us once again that we are really moving forward, that we are really determined.
Well, Kalashnikov is still offering his ideas for conducting military operations. He is right about one thing. Ukraine continues to weave a web into which Russia will inevitably get caught. The
intelligence headquarters is, in general, what stands in Kyiv, in the fourth year of the war, unharmed. Here the SBU and the GERs are there. In fact, their leaders continue to weave a web.
The so-called SVO has been going on for 4 years now, which is why even convinced Zetniks have questions. What are they doing at all, and why are they not using their capabilities to the fullest? And here the same forbidden question begins to be born. Maybe they just don't have these capabilities? Colonel Rustam Klupov is perplexed. Why hasn't Russia delivered that crushing blow that would have accelerated their desired victory?
We are not using all our capabilities, not all our resources. The disruption of logistics is also here, maybe, repeating itself. Yes, it can't be, but repeating itself. We have talked about this very often. We also talk about these notorious bridges across the Dnieper. And the whole war consists of two parameters. These are technical capabilities and political will. The question is, we don't have the technical capabilities to destroy these bridges, or, therefore, the leadership says, stop, let's wait for some reason. But if this is a technical capability, it is easily resolved. If we had set ourselves the goal of destroying the bridge on the Liman near Odessa, that's it, no one talks about it. They tried to restore it several times, but destroyed it again. Even today it is unclear whether it is in good condition or not. The same thing happened with any other bridge, like the Antonovsky Bridge. They tried to destroy it with their HIMARS. At first, nothing worked. In the end, we blew it up ourselves and made it completely unusable. And here, too, we have the strength and the ability and the means to reach every bridge. Technically, through intelligence means, anyway, asymmetrical strikes. It would seem that we are talking about, increasing our capabilities through symmetrical strikes. Ukraine has clearly shown us, we experienced this by our own example, the asymmetrical strike on Kursk brought us a lot of trouble. And now we have liberated the territories, thank God, and we are very seriously monitoring that this does not happen there in any of the other directions. Why don't we create the same conditions in the Bryansk direction, in the Kiev direction, in the Lvov direction? Let's return to this topic again in order to stretch the front line. So, the Ukrainian side does not have enough forces and resources to close all the gaps. And it is difficult for them, difficult enough to stretch their forces in these directions in order to weaken their resistance in the direction of the main attack. Now, after 3 years, the question arises of clarifying the military-political goals, taking into account that, how NATO has performed as a whole, how individual states have performed, how, to what extent Ukraine's defense is being built and how effective, therefore, are the previously set goals, because they set the goal of denazification, they gave birth to a whole galaxy of followers of these Nazis, they set themselves the goal of demilitarization, they led to the complete militarization of both society, therefore, and the state of this country.
Alexander Chalenko, a journalist who betrayed Ukraine back in 2014, admitted that people in the occupied territories still watch Ukrainian television via satellite dishes, which is why he called for fighting this problem. After all, these people can receive information about Russia's war crimes. 3 years after the restoration of historical territories with Russia, the Kiev regime does not abandon its attempts to influence the immature minds of newly minted Russians. What do you think, is our propaganda, including in the media, coping with its task? Because it seems to me that we are not doing enough to convey our point of view, including to the historical regions of Russia.
Even now, yes, after 2 years, well, then it was 2 years, and now it is the same, 3 years after the new territories joined the Russian territories. In many places, there are still Ukrainian dishes. They are popularly called Goronichi mountains. Well, they just have this kind of device, 3 heads, that's it, and they are called Goronichi. Thanks to these Goronichi, they are in villages, especially, yes, those near the front in general or in places where it is very difficult to get a signal, they receive a signal, that is, Ukrainian. And imagine that people there have been citizens of Russia for 2 years or 3, and they still receive Ukrainian television. Yes, naturally, they form such a gestalt of ideas about the world around them thanks to, that is, Ukraine. Imagine that they, the Ukrainians, will talk, right? You see? Surprising, right? Surprising. It is also surprising to me. Nothing works in these places. There is no cable television, even mobile communications barely work. The mobile operators there, the one that transmits the television signal, they can only receive information thanks to satellite antennas. That's all there is. Well, if there is electricity, of course, they came up with, I think, the People's Front or whatever this organization is called, the Front, yes, they came up with, such a free, a free solution to the problem. They come and quickly change all these dishes. They, thanks to these dishes, they broadcast, 20 TV channels. First of all, these are all the main federal channels, starting from the first one, ending with, NTV and, some entertainment channels. 20. Well, it's quite normal to receive Russian information, the Russian point of view. So, a girl was telling me literally a week ago that she walked around the center of Donetsk and, in many places she saw these Goronichi, yes, she said, I don't know, not in Rabishistan, but they are there. And it seems like from 26 onwards, repressive measures will begin. Quote, I think that this is right, yes, that's what whoever didn't exchange, that's what they cut everything off, yes, remove, because there really is a war going on now. So it is known that we can't give the enemy propaganda machine a chance, yes, to work on our territory, ours, so to speak, to liquefy our brains. I even talked to Push Island's advisor Elena Nikodina. She told me that in many liberated places there is simply no electricity, that is, it is impossible to receive any signal there, and our point of view is transmitted with the help of newspapers that we bring them there, right? That is, we explain to them there, so to speak, the party's policy. We need to explain to the locals that you are not Ukraine there, yes, that you are Novorossiya, a historical Russian land, that you should have, yes, it's okay, you are the descendants of Ukrainians there, but you are Russified, Russian culture has long been your native culture. You speak Russian, yes, you are Orthodox there, of the Moscow Patriarchate in 1914-15, Motorola was driving around Donetsk, in a jeep there and at full blast, he was putting on Ocean Elzy there, Yana, I'll give up on the failure and so on and so forth. That's what he wasn't shy about, that's how he liked it and so on. But that was in 1914-15. Now, let's say, well, how would you start listening to something Ukrainian? It always raises questions there in the frontline zones, that means.
Questions, probably, yes.
Questions, yes, about what? So what, you don't sympathize with Ukraine. And if you sympathize, aren't you a spy, right? That is, they don't need these questions. And so I, talked to guys who had encountered such things, they weren't listening to music, but some programs were playing loud sounds. The neighbors, called the relevant authorities and said, we have some kind of, Ukrainian spy behind the wall,